Hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Kevin McGovern, and this is the inaugural Game Show podcast. I am your host, Kevin McGovern. I am a physical therapist of 28 years. This is actually my second podcast venture. My first podcast, the Prove It Live podcast, can be found on all platforms. I do that with my baseball buddy, Mike Ferry, and that talks about sports and injuries and dispels all the crap that you see on social media. But this podcast is a little more tuned into my profession of physical therapy and how physical therapy can help you, giving the listener information about different injuries and how physical therapy can help, along with having some special guests. But we first have to talk about why the heck is it called a game show? So if you're here looking for the Wheel of Fortune or Match Game or $25,000 pyramid, you are in the wrong spot. The game show is an acronym. G.A.M.E stands for Graded Active Movement Exam. And a little logo, if you can see it, shows a bunch of moving people. So the history of that exam is basically that is the basis of how I evaluate people. So a little bit about me. Um, Originally, I come from a relatively kind of a big town in Connecticut called Wallingford. It actually has two public high schools and a very prestigious prep school called Choate Rosemary Hall. I didn't go to any one of them. I went to a regional high school in Middletown, Connecticut called Xavier High School. That's where I got my start, and actually, essentially, the beginnings of my career. Back in 1986, I was a very been an avid basketball player for I don't know 25 or 30 years, which is probably why I need a new knee at this point. But back in 1986, I was playing basketball at the local YMCA and went up for a layup and got pushed from the back and kind of came down and had this like catastrophic knee injury, really bad. Um, Tore my ACL, my MCL, my meniscus. It was a disaster. I was only 16 years old, and it was like right at the end of my sophomore year in high school because it was right before exams. So, did my high school exams in this long leg brace that I couldn't move, and I was on crutches and all the like. So, I got operated on that summer. Found out a couple things. Found out about growth plates. So, a growth plate is when your bone isn't actually done growing. It has a lot of more cartilage than bone, and they couldn't really drill anything in there to repair my ACL. They can do growth plate ACL reconstructions now, but back in 1986 they could not. So they could actually repair cartilage now, and of course back in 1986 they could not. So they took the cartilage out and sent me on my merry way to begin physical therapy. And if I remember correctly, I don't even think they kind of like started that. I think I kind of said, hey, my knee's not really getting that much better. What could happen? And or my parents did, so after this major operation, they didn't really send me for physical therapy. And when they finally did, my very first experience with physical therapy was being put in this room. I remember the really ugly brown 1970s paneling, and I was on this plinth, and they handed me this 7.5 pound orange ankle weight and really kind of told me to do straight leg raises. Just a really terrible experience. I know I only went a few visits and kind of never returned, but there was no follow up. There was no home exercise program. There was nothing. It was a really, really bad experience. But somehow that clicked in me that maybe I wanted to become a physical therapist when I grew up, but who knows? So, um, eventually got back to playing basketball with a brace. Had to kind of wear that brace for ever, essentially. Well, in 1997, after I got out of college and playing basketball like every day, I finally got my ACL reconstructed. And that time it was, I think the doctor said I had like a 60-year-old knee. I think I was only 23. So, but getting back to the high school story. So I began, as you got, I think your junior year, beginning of senior year, you got to start sucking up to colleges, probably less than you do now. But you had to do, volunteer hours. You had to look like you're a relatively good adult or a good prospect for these young adult, a good prospect for these colleges. So what I did is there was a um, physical therapist at the school, a trainer. He was older. He had his own business, and um, I began to like shadow him and kind of seeing what he did, and I kind of liked it. And then the summer between my I think when I was a senior, I got a job in the summer or sometime in vacation of working, for a physical therapist as like an aide, cleaning the hot tubs and doing grunt work. So I really kind of started to like it, but I wasn't really sure. So when I started to apply to schools, I knew I kind of wanted to be somewhat entrepreneurial. So I applied to schools, like half law schools and half physical therapy. Kind of crazy on one end of the spectrum to the other, right? So a trip to my eye doctor changed the course of my life forever. So I think it was probably wintertime when you had to make a really a choice for schools. And I had it down to two schools after I think I applied to maybe 14, half PT schools, half physical therapy schools. I went on two interviews, one to the University of Springfield and one to Quinnipiac University, and I got into neither college. So I think when they met me, they're like, no way are we letting this kid in. So, but on paper, I must look pretty good because I got accepted to two pretty decent schools. One was Fordham University in the Bronx, New York, and they had a full like 6 year freshman to JD, Juris Doctor program. So after 6 years, I was going to be a lawyer. Bang. Or, and I didn't visit Fordham, but I did visit Northeastern University in Boston, toured that around, and that was a 5 year co op school. Co-op meant you went to school half the time and you worked half the time, which really meant when you thought about it, you went to school or work all year round, which is like, whoa. But in the end, it was a good thing. But so I go to my eye doctor, and he's like, "So, what are you going to do?" I'm like, "Well, I got these two schools and the law, and the physical therapy." He's like, "Wow, my brother-in-law studying for the bar exam," and he said those books are like 3 feet thick. I was like, "Oh, that was it." Came home, Mom, sign the papers. We're going to be a physical therapist. Bam. So, boom. I go to Northeastern, and the rest is history. While at Northeastern, a little entrepreneurial. I started my entrepreneurial spirit when I was a middler. So your third year in a 5 year, at least in Northeastern, was called your middler year. I was the um, fundraising chairman of my fraternity, Sigma Phi Epsilon, and we did this fundraiser at this bar across from Fenway Park, which at the time was called Who's on First. It's no longer called that. I think it's called like the Bullpen or something. Anyway, it was like an off night, and I packed the place. We had all these people in there, and the owner of Who's on First, said, "Hey, would you want to do this for a job?" And I'm like, "Do what?" He's like, "Bring all these people in there, and we'll pay you." Oh, okay. Well, how much are you going to pay me? half the door. Oh, okay. So the rest is history. I began promoting a afternoon, actually, because in Massachusetts there's no happy hour due to some regulations, and I promoted something called Friday Afternoon Madness, which started at I believe 4:30 and ended at 9:30. They cleared the bar out and restarted opening at 10 or 10:30. So this is 1992, 1993. This is before the internet. This is before cell phones. This is before texting. This was literally boots on the ground, handing out flyers, getting people on the guest list, leveraging the most popular girl, the most popular kid, and getting them on, having to bring people in. So, needless to say, that Friday Afternoon Madness somehow was a smashing success. If you weren't in line by 5:30, you weren't getting in, or if you did, you'd have to get me in. I'd have to come in and kind of let you around the back. So, we had a bands play. We had this guy named Gordy Milne, who was a comedian singer, and my other buddy Chad LaMarche, who was just a acoustic guitar singer, and it was great. And stuff caught on, and I basically got, I think it was from Wednesday to Saturday, I pretty much had something going on, getting paid half the door, and literally making, I think, between two and $3,000 a week in cash back in those days. It was crazy. Um, I know when I went to the bank to put it in, after about the third or fourth deposit, the bank manager stopped me and said, hey, you're depositing a lot of cash. At that time, Boston was a pretty kind of drug infested world. I'm like, oh, no, 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 I'm not a drug addict. I'm a bar promoter. Here are the following bars. So after that, he was pretty cool. But I ended up using that to pay for my Midler junior and senior years of school. So I knew when I got out of school, I wanted to start my own business, but everyone kept telling me, I had to uh, go do something medical. I had to work at a hospital or somewhere to get more well rounded medically. Oh boy. So I took my first job out of school at this nursing home. Of course, it was a huge cut in pay because I think I got $42,000 a year. So after taxes, I was a huge cut in pay from my promoting job. So my first patient ever died. Yep, that's right, died. I didn't kill him. Age did. God took him. But yeah, so you have to document in the chart. Patient expired, stopping physical therapy care. So I was literally miserable. This was like the worst experience of my life. I cannot believe that I took this job. So, but back then there was, I think that the area was flooded with therapy jobs. Like, so you had to have a. I remember I interviewed for a couple of outpatient jobs, but I didn't have any experience, and they were looking for people with experience. Now, there's such a shortage, or there's so much more opportunity that all these places have mentoring programs and all this stuff. So I had to work a couple years, and I finally landed my first outpatient job, which turned out to be okay, but not really looked upon very favorably now to some physical therapists. So I started working at what's called a physician owned physical therapist, or a POPS. So that means the doctor's office owns the physical therapy practice. So there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through with self referral, and um, it's very vogue now because doctors realize that physical therapy is a windfall, and there's a lot of practices that do it. So it's almost status quo. People don't even think anything of it. But back then, it was really like, oh, you're working for a doctor and blah blah blah. But this doctor is really cool. It's just myself and another therapist, and he didn't bother us at all, and we went about our own thing. And I started to get, by trial and error, get more experience, and then there might have been a job or two in between. But then I started working for another company that I eventually got a director job, and they promised you the world. we're going to give you this and this and that and the thing and the stuff, and they really give you nothing. So I, uh, worked my way up. I said to, I got hired as a clinical director, and then it was time to open up another office. So basically, with their money, his money, I opened up another office in Waltham, Massachusetts, which I think is still there on 965 Main Street or somewhere. It's another physical therapist, but it's still there. So, did all the promotions, all the boots on the ground, and filled the office. And I'm like, man, I can kind of do this on my own. The one thing holding me back is I need money. So back then, I'm not sure if it's around now. They had something called SCORE, which was like it was an acronym for basically retired executives. And there was a program at BC where they would help you. You'd meet with the guy, they'd help you with your business plan. You'd write it all out. My buddy, who was an accountant, helped me with all the numbers, and you presented it to a bank, and voila, they would give you money. So I did that, and voila, they gave me $75,000. So with $75,000, I opened up my first office on March 15th, 2000, called McGovern Physical Therapy Associates in Revere, Massachusetts, and the rest is kind of history. So owned that for a while, eventually sold that. Now, currently, I own a cash-based center in Acton, Massachusetts called Perfect Motion Sports Therapy. But this is how G.A.M.E came evolved. So my hatred for insurance companies started, of course, when you own your own business, and they would cut your reimbursement or stop allowing your patient to come. All kinds of hoops you had to jump through, and just using my own example, that really basically the test for functionality is range of motion and strength. Well, my right knee, which was ACL deficient, was strong. I could kick you across the room, but I could never essentially go up for a rebound and land on my right leg. That I would never do that. That I just wouldn't. I didn't have good function in it. Right, it was never the same. So I needed a test to kind of measure people's function. In an outpatient practice, you could have the elderly to the athlete, right? So I needed a test that would be one test that would encompass all of them. So there wasn't really anything on the market, and was looking around, and finally just kind of started looking at functional movements, and realized that everybody has one thing in common, right? The one thing they have in common is their sequence of movement, right? To get out of a chair is a sequence of movement, A to B to C to D. And that doesn't change. It's essentially a study of kinesiology. So I began looking at different movements, and voila, the McGovern movement screen was born. That was to get essentially all my therapists on the same page doing these functional tests so that one, we could show progress to the patient, but also we could show the need for physical therapy by these shyster insurance companies. So after a while, I think back in maybe 2004, the G.A.M.E test, which stands for Graded Active Movement Exam, came into play, became copywritten material. It's got a copyright, and essentially I've been using the G.A.M.E test and all of the corrective exercises that go along with it as essentially what separates me from other physical therapists. And I have some unique shoulder tests, and I've got the lunge, the squat, the single leg deadlift, the crane for lower extremity tests. And using it every day, I learn something new every day. Every day, using it, how one part of the body uses another or neglects another if there's an injury, and going through this test. No one has ever passed it the first time around. No one. I've had Olympic athletes take it because no one has perfect sequential movement. The body is an amazing tool. It will do what you tell it to do always, and it will always do what you tell it to do, right or wrong. So the G.A.M.E test measures all of that, and the corrective exercises for that test are just parts of that movement. So basically, now my practice essentially it's separated. I've used the G.A.M.E as a moniker, especially sports. G.A.M.E 7. Everyone knows that G.A.M.E 7 is the final game of a championship series. So I use game 7 as the client's goal, whatever that may be. Whether I've had, just past few months, I've had a woman say that she wants to get in better shape to have a child. I've got a guy who wants to get back to triathlon. So that becomes their game 7 goal. They take the test, and parts of the test, you are ranked game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4, game 5, game 6, and to get to game 7. And there are criteria that you have to meet. So, for instance, to go from game 3 to game 4, you have to pass the squat and the lunge test. And I have 3 different levels of the game test. So, as you pass the game test, you go into the dynamic game test, which is really, really about perfecting your movement. I look at athletes or movement as a bunch of high speed, a camera taking high speed pictures, right? If an athlete's moving left or right or whatever, there's a bunch of pictures. And if I can take out, if there's 50 pictures and I can take out 10 of them that movement doesn't apply to the betterment of the movement, we can refine it and they can go from picture 3 to picture 7. They're going to be that much better of an athlete. What I see out there is there's so much preparatory or excess movement that's not needed that slows somebody down, that makes people susceptible to injury, whether you're an athlete or just the average Joe, right? So we want to refine our movement, because movement is medicine. The more precise we can move, the better we can move, the quicker we can move, with less steps we can move, the better, healthier human being we are going to be. So the game show is based essentially on that technology and the name because it's kind of cool. So again, it's not for the Wheel of Fortune. It's not for Jeopardy. The game show is going to be all about physical therapy. Each episode, you're hopefully going to learn something about some injury or some part of the human body. I'm going to be having guests on the show, other physical therapy, other health providers. I'm also going to be having clients of mine that have had success stories and how really physical therapy can help them, because the real purpose of this is so that I can help as many people as possible. I'm soon going to be having an online platform, so I won't just be able to help people locally. I'll be able to help people around the world with this game technology, because at the end of the day, it really does work. Um, if you need to contact the show, please, you can email me at Kevin J, middle initial J as in John, McGovern at gmail.com. I'd appreciate any questions that you have. You can search me on YouTube. Look for Dr. Kevin J. McGovern. You will see this up on YouTube, as well as other instructional videos. And I am here to help. So thank you for listening and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye now.